Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful evening. I'm so glad that you could join us. My name is Stacy, and I work for the Communications Department for the Douglas County School District. And welcome to DCSD Parent University. With the help of our partner, Skyridge Medical Center, this program aims to provide monthly engaging, relevant, and helpful content to DCSD parents like you. Tonight's webinar is on youth vaping recognition, prevention, and intervention. Studies by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment show that 1 in 4 Colorado teens vape regularly, which is consistently the highest in the country and can greatly impact a kid's health for years to come. Tonight, we hope that you'll walk away more prepared to recognize if your child is vaping, how you can prevent it in the first place, what you can do to intervene, and what resources are here to support you. To lead us in this evening's discussion, please join me in welcoming our guests. First off, we have Dr. Katrina Iverson, the Pediatric Emergency Medicine Director at Skyridge Medical Center. Joining us, we also have Sergeant Mark Mithuen of the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. We will have a 30-minute presentation followed by 15 minutes for live questions and answers. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your Zoom window to submit it. And this whole webinar will be recorded and available public afterwards. But in the meantime, please sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this learning opportunity with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Iverson. I'm just going to share some slides with you here, get us started. Perfect. All right. So I am the medical director of the Pediatric Emergency Department at Skyridge Medical Center. So we're just going to be going over youth vaping tonight, kind of initially talking about what it is, kind of different forms, a little bit about the health concerns with vaping, and then we'll kind of go into all of the recognition, prevention, and intervention. I will try to answer any questions that pop up as they come, but I'm sorry if I miss them. We can always do them at the end as well. Already technical difficulties. I'm just trying to advance my slides and I don't know how to do it. Let's see. It was working a second ago. No. Oh, see, Stacy, we tried to do all this beforehand and yet it's not wanting to do it.
You know, it's just one of those weeks. It happens to us all, right? I was here myself several years.
Okay, when I do that, it works. So let's try one more time here. We'll see. We'll do this and then do present. There we go. Okay, just needed a reload. It's all good. If first you don't succeed, try again. Okay, so what is vaping? So we hear several terms for this, electronic cigarettes or e-cigarettes, vape pens, vape mods. There's a lot of slang that we'll get into a little bit later. These are battery operated devices. They heat a liquid and produce an aerosol that then the user inhales. And these can contain several different things. Mostly we're going to focus on nicotine today, but they can have THC, CBD, and then flavoring can be with or without these other things as well. So some people will call this vape juice or e-juice. This is the liquid we were talking about. Most of it is just filler. So this propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin. And then there's a little bit sometimes of food coloring and water to kind of help distribute. I'm just going to say nicotine from now on, but any of the active substances in there. And that's kind of what comes in these little modules. That is what is getting aerosolized. So the original e-cigarettes were really designed to look like more conventional cigarettes. And you can see here in this picture, it kind of gives you that diagram showing you the battery and the atomizer, and then the vapor, which is what it heats, and then the person will inhale there. But a lot of our newer versions are really looking less and less like cigarettes. And often now they can be refillable and rechargeable as well. So a couple different types. We see these tanks and mods, which are a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit easier to recognize because they don't look like other things. But now we're seeing a lot that look kind of like USB ports as well. And then these disposable cigarettes that look kind of more like regular cigarettes. One of the most popular, I would guess, companies is this company called Juul. And in 2020, it actually had 42% of the market. And looking at the stats back in 2018, it was over 60%. So they're having a little bit more competition, but still one of the most common ones that we see kids using. And this is where the term juuling came from. So you may hear people say, I'm going to juul, or I'm juuling instead of vaping. And that's because of this company called Juul. So here is a picture of one of their kind of common vape pens that you can get. Vuse is another company that is becoming more popular, and it had 26% of the market in 2020. The thing with Vuse, when you go to their website, what you'll notice is that you can personalize these and make them very nice and fancy. So they have these wraps, and you can put different designs on your vape pen. So they're kind of really marketing to teens and young adults by kind of making them a little bit more trendy or personalized as well. And these are all the refillable kinds. So these are the cartridge refills that you can buy with these. The ones on the blue are the Juul, and the other side are the Vuse as well. And so, when we talk about vaping and the reason we really care about it and the prevalence of what we're seeing. So there's many national surveys that are done. I'm gonna move, sorry, my window here. So the one, this is back in 2018, but national surveys of middle and high school students really showed a sharp increase in vaping, really over the past decade, but more over the past couple of years. And we'll see a little chart here in a second, but that showed that over 10% of middle school students are vaping and over 25% of high school students are vaping. And they also noted that this increase in e-cigarette use was greater than the increase in any other tobacco product. So apparently my computer likes to only work sometimes. There we go. So here is the table for, this is from middle school students. So you can kind of see the black line at the top is any tobacco product. So we start back in 2011 and go up to 2019. So you can kind of see that at the end point there, it was up to 12.5% for any tobacco use. The red line is e-cigarettes. So you can see back in 2011 through 2013, it really kind of was not a big thing in the market, and then kind of starts to see a jump there in 2013. And then over the last 2018 to 19 had a really big jump. The bottom is all other types. So they put them in cigars, cigarettes, smokeless, or like chewing tobacco, and then hookahs. And those have pretty much kind of stayed the same or even declined a little bit as the e-cigarettes have climbed. And this is just showing the high school students, so just a higher percentage of use. So up to 31% for all tobacco use, and then the 27.5% for e-cigarettes in 2019. So again, you can kind of see that sharp increase over the last few years. So there was another survey done in 2020. This was the National Youth Tobacco Survey, and it did show a little bit of a decline in use. So we went down to 19.6% in 2020 from 27.5% for the high school students, and down to 4.7% from 10.5% in middle school students. There's not really any real data about why they think this happened. There's a lot of theories that partly it was because of COVID and kids not being in school, and so not being able to get supplies from their friends or other people at school, and not being able to be out and about and getting things. I think people who are a little more optimistic think it was partly some changes in laws, and we'll see that in a minute here with kind of flavoring in the different devices as well. But nobody really knows. Those are just kind of theories. Also of note, in the survey, they asked about daily use. So they're finding that most of the users are not daily users. So of that, 19.6% of high school students who are using, 22.5% of them are using daily. And of the 4.7% of middle school students, only 9% of those are daily users. So we're not seeing a huge daily use, but there are some kids that aren't doing that. So what is the appeal of vaping for kids? And Sergeant Mithuen, if you want to jump in here at any point when we get to this stuff, just pop on and stop me. So I think there's a misconception. A lot of people think that vaping is safer than traditional smoking. So, you feel like, oh, I'm not burning anything. I'm not getting all these carcinogens into my lungs. So people think that it's safer in that regard. It kind of has a relative lower cost. Definitely, you can spend a lot of money and as much or more than buying regular cigarettes, but really you could get a vape pen for $1. And then, if you need to get refills, you can get 2 packs, which is equivalent to 200 puffs for $5. And then these disposable ones, you can get at this company called Puff Bars as a reference for $12, and that has 400 puffs. And usually a 20 pack of cigarettes is around $6 or $7, depending on what you're getting. So, you're getting more use out of your vape pen if you're getting these than you would out of a regular cigarette. The other big thing, which has changed a little bit, is the flavors. So definitely when these first hit the market, we were seeing a lot of flavors in all of these. And so you could look and there was multiple different kinds. Back in 2020, they cracked down on this somewhat. They were able to ban flavoring in any refillable cartridges. So now the only refillable flavors you can get is menthol and tobacco, but they did not ban that for the disposable cigarettes. So you can still buy the different flavors from all of the disposable cigarettes as well. Other appeals of this, it's easier to hide for kids. They're small. They don't smell like traditional cigarettes. They can hide them in many different places, have them up their sleeve and just kind of pull it out and puff when they're sitting there. It's pretty easy for them to obtain through their friends at school, online, at gas stations. I'm going to let Sergeant Mithuen jump in here in just one second. And then, it's considered more socially acceptable, not just for teens, but everybody. I think that vaping is okay to do out and about and around other people. So it's unfortunately become a little bit more of that socially acceptable habit as well. So I'm going to let Sergeant Mithuen jump in a little bit with his take here.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. We are seeing a uptrend in vaping and Juuls and disposable devices when it comes to being in our schools. With school being back and everyone back in, we're starting to see an increase in that. One of the easy ways that we're finding this is actually online, and I just went online about 5 minutes ago, and in about 10 minutes, you can get a fake ID from any state that you wish. And these IDs are not our typical back in the day, take a photo, put it on a card and hope it got you into somewhere. These fake IDs are actually IDs that have the magnet strip on the back that when we in law enforcement or a gas station actually swipes it, it puts in the machine that they are of age, and it reads off the information on it. So anyone can go online. There's multiple different sites, and these go anywhere from $50 up to $200, depending upon how many fake IDs you want. We do find some kids with multiple state IDs. So if they get caught with one, they have backup ones. So they are being easier to obtain. The PayPal accounts, there's really no true hard way of identifying the person using it. So they can get pretty much anything shipped to different friends' houses or different addresses. So, and then when it comes to hiding, what we're finding is there's actually clothing line that is out there that is being produced right now that have different pockets sewn into hats. There's different apparel that has pictures that relates that you have these devices on you and that you're going to sell them. So we're watching that as well in our schools. But all I can say is make sure, if you're watching your kids, if they've got a debit card or a credit card, watching what they're spending, watching PayPal accounts such as that, because that is where we're finding most of these devices are being ordered online.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, the clothing lines. I think you had sent me some where the sneakers had it in the tongue, and then the hat and some of the clothes too have little pockets sewn in. And another parent told me too that even like the Lululemon pants have little pockets, not made specifically for vaping, but for people that are working out that want to hold their key or that kind of thing. And that people are using that as well to kind of hide them to get into school too. So how to recognize vaping. And I've just kind of put little pictures around so that people are kind of more familiar as well, because it definitely can look like any other electronic device. So as Sergeant Mithuen alluded to, follow the money. So, if your child has a debit card or, they have some kind of electronic, account, whether it's PayPal or Venmo or anything like that, kind of watching that. And then also in the sense of, are they asking you for $10 here and $10 there, but you're not seeing what they're using it for? It's not like, oh, they're going out with friends to dinner, or they're saving up to buy something, or they're getting stuff. It's just kind of, you're always kind of giving them a little bit of money. Just think about what they're doing with that as well. The other thing is, kids are not always the brightest when they think about things. So if you walk by and there's something plugged into the USB port or the outlet and it just kind of looks weird, you ask them what it is, they're going to be like, oh, it's some, electronic device for my video game, but it could be one of these rechargeable pens as well. So kind of think about that too. The fruity smell, it is waxing and waning on that. I know that was really big initially when everything was flavored, but as we said, now that the disposable ones can still be flavored, you may just get that faint kind of fruity smell off of them as well. Some other kind of more medical stuff. So sleep disturbance, which is more of a nicotine or THC effect. Vapor's tongue. So when you're vaping all the time, it can actually dull your taste buds and dry out your mouth. And so they'll actually be seeking more flavor. So they may start adding more flavor to their foods or hot sauce, or asking for stuff because they can't taste as well as they used to. Also interesting is a decrease in caffeine. So nicotine and caffeine can kind of be synergistic or even compete against each other. And so sometimes you'll notice if your child was always drinking Starbucks every day, suddenly they're not, because it can have a bad side effect for them that they don't like. So they'll actually stop drinking caffeine in favor of vaping. And then any just kind of unexplained coughing or throat clearing or mouth sores from the vaping. And then also just watching social media posts. Obviously this is not exclusive to vaping, but again, kids like to brag to their friends or show off or that kind of thing. And so often you can kind of catch on to what they're doing just by looking at that as well. Anything to add, Sergeant Mithuen?
I would just say that the kids that we're seeing that are actually selling these in, most of the time they're keeping them in their backpacks, so that we find that they have little compartments inside backpacks, and they'll put 20 to 30 of these devices in, and they will go and sell these devices in schools within the first 20 minutes of school. They're kind of the known to go to. So just if you see some unusual shapes in backpacks and things like that, take a look, see what it is. It's, if they're like, oh, it's 30 USBs for their friends, it's probably a vape.
Yeah. Yes. Or not so much when they're at school, but the other thing I heard a parent tell me is when the boys start going to the bathroom together, nothing good is coming from that. Boys don't don't go to the bathroom together. So if you're at sporting events or different places and they're kind of buddying up, to go to the bathroom together, that can be a hint as well that something is happening. This is just another picture of a Juul product. So this is a recharge port. So the number 3 is the battery, the 2 is the pen, and then the 1 holds a refill, so they can carry this around and have a portable rechargeable device with them too. Okay, so going a little bit into adverse health effects. So there's not a lot of data that I could find about who's using nicotine and who's using THC, but there's definitely both. Nicotine does seem to be a higher use rate. And so, nicotine exposure, the big thing with vape and vape pens is that it's actually usually a higher concentration than it is in a normal cigarette. So that's part of the issue too, and why these aren't safer than cigarettes, is even though maybe you're not inhaling a bunch of carcinogens, you're actually getting a higher dose of nicotine when you're using this, which can make it more likely you're going to get addicted. So nicotine can cause, elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure. Eventually this can affect athletic performance. So just thinking about your kids that are in athletics, if they're having trouble, that can be a sign. It does increase risk of heart attack and stroke, less common in adolescents, but it can happen. It can also worsen mood disorders. So anxiety, depression, just, anger issues. It has been shown that it can actually cause permanent lowering of impulse control in adolescents because of their developing brain. And it can harm the part of the brain that controls attention and learning. So they may start having trouble in school as well, even when they didn't before. Like I said earlier, the higher level of nicotine can lead to addiction. As well. And, the human brain is developing up until age 25. And so definitely kids, when they're exposed to nicotine or other addicting substances at a young age, their brain is growing faster and making these connections faster. And so it can actually promote them to make these connections in their brain that get them addicted faster and can make it harder for them to break that addiction, and also make it easier for them to get addicted to other substances. So also they're being exposed to the aerosol, the vapor part of the vape pen. So these aerosols obviously can contain nicotine, ultrafine particles, heavy metals, volatile organic compounds. A lot of these, we don't know the long-term effects yet. We'll get into some of the short-term stuff that we've seen, but as far as long-term effects, it's really not known yet at this point. There have been some preliminary studies showing possible links to asthma and cancer and chronic lung disease. So I think in 2018 was the year that we heard about this EVOLI, which really stands for e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. And we had over, I think, 3,000 cases in the United States of kind of this unexplained lung injury in teens and young adults, where they would come in with cough, shortness of breath, chest pain. Sometimes they'd have fever, so they looked often like pneumonia. But then, when we'd work them up for infectious type things, they wouldn't have it. A lot of them ended up having really severe lung injury, being in the intensive care unit, and a lot of them died. Eventually, it was thought to be linked to this vitamin E acetate that was being added to some of the liquid for the vape pens. So that has mostly been removed, but there is still some out there. And what the CDC and some other places are saying is, people that are getting vape pens from friends or kind of sources that aren't, I don't know if legit is the right word, but reliable sources are more likely to potentially have other additives in it that can cause these problems. And with this EVOLI, like most of the kids did require admission, and it is thought that a lot of them will have kind of lifelong lung damage. Obviously, it's only been a few years, so that jury is still out, but we are seeing kids with still issues from a few years ago. So this is just a nice little x-ray to show you kind of a normal chest x-ray versus an EVOLI chest x-ray. So you can see in the normal, you see a lot of kind of black in the lungs. And then on that EVOLI one, it's just kind of white everywhere, which is just inflammation and fluid and infiltrates and scarring of the lungs. So in general, vaping is going to cause inflammation and depressed immune function in the lungs. And this will reduce your ability to fight off bacterial and viral infections. So even just normal colds, COVID-19, they did some studies that did show that adolescents who vaped were more likely to be diagnosed. And the thought is because of all this local inflammation and that depressed immune function in the lungs, making it easier for those pathogens to kind of infiltrate the body and make you sick as well. And then two, if you have other underlying problems like asthma or that kind of thing, it's going to make those worse as well. So just overall, vaping will make it harder for your body to kind of fight off infections and possibly make infections worse for you. A few other health risks. There's just the risk of devices. So they are electronic devices. They can cause burns, they can explode, they can cause chemical injuries. Sergeant Mithuen, we should have pulled up those pictures you had. He had some really great pictures of some people who had it explode in their mouth and lost teeth and burns and cuts, and very, very good pictures of that. The other thing I like to bring up is not just the person that's vaping, but the bystander. So we've seen a huge increase in calls to poison centers about younger children who have been exposed. So the lethal dose for children of nicotine ingestion is 10 milligrams. So in those 5 ml vial refills of nicotine that you can get, there's 100 milligrams. So if a child ingests that or even gets it enough on their skin or in their eye, it can be lethal for children. So just something else to think about too for other kids in the home, or even anybody, honestly, if you ingested enough, could have that issue as well. So just a little short tidbit here on marijuana. So many of the older teens, start with nicotine and then move on to vaping cannabis. So in 2019, in a survey, they found that 21% of 12th graders had reported vaping marijuana, 19% of 10th graders, 7% of 8th graders. So it is out there. Again, same with nicotine, the level of THC is higher in vapes than any other form. They often look exactly like a nicotine vaping device. So this is one down here in the corner. Again, I think the appeal, it's virtually odorless. You can add flavors to those as well. Comes in different flavors, and I just put the PAX brand is the one that we have the pictures of, which is a popular brand as well. And marijuana as well has lots of side effects too. So impaired attention can cause the same kinds of things as nicotine, learning problems, memory and cognitive dysfunction, impaired reaction times, difficulty in school, again, increased risk of mental health issues as well, and then more likely to cause addiction to other substances as well. So this is just a few more pictures of those marijuana vape pens. So if you remember the pictures we looked at before, look very similar. So almost identical to the nicotine ones as well. All right, so a little bit on intervention. So, a lot of kids, especially the kids that are daily users or using quite frequently, not many of those are going to quit on their own. You usually have to kind of intervene and help them to quit. So we always like to try to do the kind of open discussion approach with teenagers instead of the accusatory punishment on the get-go. So it kind of helps to just understand, why your child is vaping. So, you can ask them like, what do you enjoy about vaping and how does vaping make you feel? And just kind of information gathering sometimes that can kind of help you figure out why they're doing it. Other examples too, is it for stress? Do they have other underlying issues with anxiety and depression and they're self-medicating? Is it because their friends are doing it? So just trying to get an idea of what they like about it, why they're doing it, so you can kind of help guide your approach. And then you can start asking, does vaping get in the way of what's important to you? So, if they're an athlete, or they used to do well in school, but they're not, or is it affecting their relationships? You can start even asking them, is it controlling your life? Has it become something that you feel like you have to have all the time? So I've heard from multiple kids that after they've had it for a while, they just feel like they always have to have it with them, and it's just something they always have to have, or almost like a nervous tick that they just kind of do it and don't even realize sometimes. Another thing I will say is, kindly challenge your child on their perception of the norms. I think at all ages, they'll tell you that everybody's doing it. All my friends, have those shoes. All my friends are vaping. All my friends are this. And, their perception of how many of their peers are really doing it is probably a little bit skewed. So really kind of helping them see that, no, not everybody is doing it. We like to kind of focus on the health approach too. So trying to really resist the lecturing and yelling and punishment, but really show your concern about your child's health and safety. And kind of, I have some references at the end of different sites you can go on to as well that kind of are geared toward teens and helping them kind of understand for themselves the health concerns and safety and how it's going to affect them long-term as well. And then, if you need to, it's always great to involve other people. So you can talk to your pediatrician and they can definitely talk to your child one-on-one too and talk about kind of health concerns and help them develop a quit plan. So, deciding what day we're going to do it and kind of coming up with how we're going to do this. Like, do we think we can do it on our own? Do we need to set up counseling? There's different lot of options now, not just in-person counseling, but even the texting type of thing as well, so that there's kind of less of that money aspect and going someplace. There's a lot of self-help material. And then too, they can determine if, the child's been using a lot and is addicted, whether or not they need help with withdrawal symptoms as well. And then they can also help you address any underlying mental or emotional problems as well. It's important to kind of know what challenges to expect for you and your teen. So helping them recognize any triggers they might have and how to manage those, how to resist temptations, not, hanging out with certain people if that's going to be the issue or going certain places, and then being prepared for the cravings and withdrawal. There's a little bit of a list there on nicotine withdrawal and symptoms. Sorry, I'm going to speed up a bit because I realize I'm taking too long here. And then also help them kind of identify motivation to quit. So the adverse health effects we already talked about, talking to them about the monetary cost, how much money they're spending on this every week or every month, any social concerns, if they're doing athletics, and then if they can have peer support as well and hanging out with people that aren't vaping as well. Going along with prevention, always good to set a good example, being a tobacco-free home. It helps to be familiar, which hopefully this talk helped you with a little bit as well, with the common brands and devices, so that when you're talking to them, you kind of have some knowledge as well. But I also think it helps to take really an inquisitive and curious approach with your teen too. So, just being like, hey, I heard that this is happening at school. Like, what do you think? Or, do a lot of kids at school vape, and just kind of getting an idea of if they're aware of it and what's happening and what they think about it. Maybe they already tried it and they said, oh, I don't like it, I'm not going to. And you can have those conversations with them, or, head it off before they've tried it if their friends have been pressuring them, and really be ready just to listen and gather information rather than lecture as well. And then again, focusing on health and safety. You can acknowledge the appeal of it and help them kind of weigh the risks against the perceived benefits of doing it, and have these, it doesn't have to be one long conversation, but often multiple short conversations in the car or different places can kind of help. And then really, set clear expectations that you do expect them, not to vape. And you can set kind of those safe spaces too, that if you did try it, please come and talk to me and we can talk about it more. If you do set consequences, make sure they're not kind of overly harsh or long lasting, and then encourage and reward their healthy behavior if they're doing well. And then if they do have other underlying issues with anxiety, depression, stress, just help them find ways to kind of cope with that without having to turn to vaping. And then you can even kind of help them role play resistance skills. So if they've acknowledged to you that, yes, my friends are trying to get me to vape, or I'm in these situations, like helping them how they're going to approach that, how they can get out of it. We hear a lot too with other, alcohol and different things of like, you can always text me a safe word and I'll pretend it's me that's, making you leave, that kind of stuff as well. And here's just a list of resources. There's many, many more out there. I'm sorry, I feel like I went over my time. I didn't leave enough time for questions, but I'm going to unshare my screen here. And I see that there's a bunch of things here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iverson. And I do want to say that I will include a list of those resources on that last slide in tomorrow's email when I send out the recording of the webinar. I now want to open up the floor for anyone who may have questions for our two guests. As I said earlier, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window. In the meantime, as people are gathering their thoughts, I wanted to ask, Sergeant Mithuen, are there any specific resources available at schools, like with the school resource officers for this?
There is. We have some deputies that are assigned to our YES program. They go into middle schools. They teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. A lot about health and safety, the topics such as relationships, but one topic that they do cover is vaping and drugs. And I will say that one of the things that we are starting to see with the marijuana side of things is when it's refillable, a lot of people aren't knowing what's in there. We are seeing some juice that is starting to get laced with heavier things such as fentanyl and other types, to the point where we are having some kids unfortunately have to go by ambulance over to Sky Ridge because of overdoses. And it's all because they don't know what they're putting into their vapes. So it is extremely important to stop this before it gets out of control, especially with kids. And yeah, it does start with nicotine, but we have seen it go beyond that, and we don't like to see that. And our SROs are trained to a lot of people think, oh, we're just going to write a ticket and be done. No, that's not what our SROs like to do. We are there to support kids and families. And if you have a question or anything about a vape pen or drugs or anything in particular, our SROs are well trained to handle those questions and have a conversation with you.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that information. I do want to note that the program that you mentioned, the YES program, stands for Youth Education and Safety in Schools. And that's a program specifically with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I also want to put in a little plug for our DCSD counselors and school psychologists. They are also a great resource for families, especially if you want to work with your kid on some of those like emotional, mental contributing factors or so. If we don't have any more questions, I think we can wrap a little early. Dr. Iverson, Sergeant Mithuen, do either of you have parting words?
My only parting words are your pediatrician and us in the emergency department are always here to help. So if you have any concerns or any urgent medical needs, you can always come and see us at Sky Ridge.
I would just say that our SROs and our sheriff's office is committed to safety and helping everybody, especially in these times that we've got right now. But we're in schools. We're part of the school and part of the administration. You see us walking around all the time. Have your kids or you come in and talk with us. We're there. We're a good resource and we're happy to help.
Thank you very much. We do have one question that came in. How do you handle a child that is getting a vape from another student that a parent is providing?
So when it comes to that, we do look at how are these kids getting it. If we are able to track it down to certain kids, or to certain parents, we address those based on certain criminal charges contributing to delinquency of a minor. They can be charged with the possession, unlawful sale. There's a variety of things that we can look at, but we truly try to help the kids who are getting it, and also those kids that are selling. We just want to stop it before it does come into our schools and affect, and we want it to be stopped before unfortunately something happens to something bad, and we do have to send them over to Sky Ridge Medical Center. So that's a very good question, but we do take those serious and we do investigate them all the way through.
Thank you for answering that. One last chance. Any live Q&A? All right. Well, I'm going to count that as where all of our questions are answered for now. Of course, if you do find yourself having some questions or needing more resources, you can reach out to anybody here. My email is on every single communication that goes out, and I will happily connect you with anybody. So I do have one last thing for tonight before we close. So like I said, a recording of this webinar will be sent out tomorrow via email. You'll also get a list of those sites that Dr. Iverson presented. And in exchange, we really would appreciate your input by filling out a brief anonymous survey. You can access that survey by scanning the QR code on the screen right now, or by going to the bit.ly Parent Youth Feedback Vaping. And this also gives you a chance to get a free mini first aid kit from Skyridge Medical Center. Just leave your mailing address and they'll ship it to your front door. And I also want to invite you to our next Parent University webinar on how parents can support psychological and physical safety in schools. This will be with our Director of Mental Health and Director of Safety and Security at DCSD. That webinar is on Wednesday, October 27th at 5 p.m. You can find more information and the registration link at dcsdk12.org/Parent University. And you'll also find some information on our November webinar on early learners elementary literacy, which I'm super excited for. So anyway, thank you, Dr. Iverson, Sergeant Mithuen, for joining us and sharing your time and expertise. And thank you to everyone who joined us. I sure hope you'll join us for future ones, and have a wonderful evening.